Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be doing another top 10. Today I'm going to be doing top 10 intriguing historical graveyard finds. So, number 10, the unknown baby from the Titanic. When the Titanic sank underneath the surface of the Atlantic in 1912, the youngest body pulled from the waves was that of the baby boy. He was buried in a graveyard in Nova Scotia, Canada, under a tombstone that simply identified him as the unknown child. Perhaps because he was blonde and in the right age group, he was first thought to be a 2-year-old Swedish baby called Gösta Leonard Paulsen, whom witnesses had seen being washed overboard as the Titanic sank. It was later found that it wasn't Paulsen. It took 7 more years before his shoes finally gave this nameless baby his real identity back. Having their doubts, researchers took another look at the leather booties kept at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic and realised they were too big for a 1-year-old child. The only remaining kid on the passenger list that fit was Sidney Leslie Goodwin from England. This time the US Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory confirmed with certainty that this baby was indeed Goodwin. He had been travelling in 3rd class with his family, all of whom perished at sea. Number 9, the Hidden Cemetery. About 650 unidentified skeletons have been unearthed outside Johannesburg, South Africa. Dating back to the turn of the 20th century, the graveyard's all-male population, aged 18 to 25, at the time of their deaths, was buried wrapped only in cowhide blankets or canvas. Somehow, the cemetery vanished from the records and inevitably disappeared from sight and memory when it became a mine dump. Since there are no tombstones either, archaeologists' best hope is to restore the barest details to each body, like race and perhaps where they came from. They were most likely migrant miners. Number 8. Rare Roman Gladiators. A puzzling gravesite in York, England, where nearly 80 young men lie buried, is providing researchers with never before seen glimpses into what dangers Roman gladiators faced. The 1,800-year-old remains were originally theorized to be victims of a military suppression campaign against rebels, until more discoveries proved that they were blood sport fighters. Researchers determined that the muscles in the right arms of the men were much more powerful, something Roman writers had written about gladiators who trained from their teens onward. And they were also found decapitated. Removing the head from an opponent's shoulders was a common end to a fight in the arena. Also, lion or tiger bites were found on the bones of many of the skeletons, the sort of standoff that could only have happened in the arena. Number 7. The Missing Body. Thomas Curry's short life was a tragic one. When he was about 7 years old, his father, also called Thomas, shot himself, and the boy's mother, in 1925, the teenaged Curry died under mysterious circumstances when he tried to run for his life from a notoriously cruel reform school. The coroner, who did the autopsy, listed a skull crushed by unknown means as the reason for death. The school, however, claimed that he had been hit by a train. Murder! The Dozier School for Boys shut their doors in 2011 after hundreds of now grown men who had attended the institution, came forward with stories of torture, murder, and friends who had vanished. Curry had only been there for a month, but he became one of 96 students to die under the care of the school. In 2013, investigators found 55 children buried in a makeshift graveyard on the grounds. Since 9 other runaways had all died, some from clear signs of violence such as gunshot wounds, hit and runs, or blunt force trauma, investigators wanted to determine if Curry had been murdered and decided to exhume the body. They arrived at his family plot in Philadelphia, where Curry had been buried, without a tombstone on top of his great-grandparents. But when his coffin was cracked open, Thomas wasn't there. The school had shipped a box full of wood to his family for burial. Curry's body remains missing. Number 6. Giant lemur bones. Explorers have found a priceless collection of giant lemur skeletons and other extinct animals in a cave in Madagascar. While scientists are happy about the unprecedented chance to study the large lemurs, the mystery of how the graveyard came into existence is still not fully solved. The gorilla-sized lemurs got booted into extinction with the arrival of humans on the island between 2,000 and 500 years ago. While there's almost no doubt that humans had a direct hand in their demise as a species, the specimens in the watery depths of the Avon Cave in Tsimanetese National Park showed no sign of being wounded by hunters or even being eaten after death by scavengers. Number 5. The Iceman bloodline. Otzi the Iceman is a pretty famous mummy known by scientists and the internet community as that shriveled brown guy who was discovered in 1991 by hikers in the Otzi Mountains. The ancient murder victim, who died from an arrow wound and a crushed skull, left a lot behind for researchers to investigate, including tools, clues to what he ate, and how he was one of the earliest sufferers of Lyme disease now on record. Perhaps his most intriguing legacy is that his bloodline lives on, because the 40-something was packed under snow after his death and then sealed off with strata of ice. His body was preserved enough to allow viable genetic testing. Scientists from Australia managed to isolate a rare genetic mutation in the 5,300-year-old corpse, one that only passes down the male line, and discovered that Otzi had at least 19 male descendants alive today. That number is likely to increase since they are planning on testing more male Austrians in the future. Number 4. Impaled Schools. In southeast Sweden, archaeologists found a rather unique cemetery. It consists of skulls impaled on sticks, and it is at the bottom of a lake. The shallow lake has long since dried up, which made the discovery possible when excavations for a railway line started in the area. The 8,000-year-old site was used by a Stone Age community to either bury their dead or ritually discard the heads of their enemies. Researchers aren't entirely certain. There are 11 heads of adults of both genders and youngsters that range from children to babies. Number 3. Potted pups. At Abydos, one of Egypt's most ancient places, archaeologists made a very unusual discovery. They found 5 dogs preserved in pots, something never before seen, even in a country known for its obsessive animal burials. 2 of the better preserved 3,000-year-old dogs stumped the experts with the strangeness of their mummification. Due to the time and process of preparing a mummy, flexibility gets compromised to the point where a body would break if forced into a pot. Yet somehow the large dogs were lowered into their containers without damage, and both were curled up in their jars as if they had been supple enough to be carefully arranged. Number 2. Vampire cemeteries. Poland was a place that vampires avoided during medieval times. The folks there knew how to put down the undead. Those who didn't escape the locals' attention were found by construction workers building a road near the town of Gliwice. They made for a chilling grave site. Whoever had interred them in their final resting place had been desperate enough to make certain that they remained that way. Their heads had been chopped off and placed on the lower part of their bodies. Number 1. Miguel de Cervantes. Considered to be the world's first best-selling author, Miguel de Cervantes passed away in 1616. He was a war veteran, poet, and creator of the unforgettable character Don Quixote. Despite the fact that Don Quixote was such a huge hit, author royalties didn't exist back then, and Cervantes never grew wealthy. No tombstone marked his burial at the convent of the Barefoot Trinitarians. By 60 years after his death, no one alive remembered where he was buried. That's all for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and as always, subscribe.